Can everyone see the problems here on this board? Okay, so last week we discussed, we introduced the idea of first order logic, or FOL, as an artificial language which is made up of symbols that we use to represent different sentences which we assign a truth value based on a domain of interpretation or domain of discourse. And today, I'm going to introduce some of the vocabulary of this artificial language called FOL, or first order logic. And so we have a glossary of some key terms, and these are terms we're going to be going over most of these terms today. And if I cover everything I hope to cover today, you should be able to tell me what these things say and whether they're true or false relative to a domain of interpretation. Okay? So let's begin. So we start by imagining, creating an imaginary world. We call it snow globe world. Right, so imagine a snow globe, you cut down in half. This is the ground and this is the sky. And in this snow globe, we imagine there are three individuals in snow globe world. Okay, and we'll give these individuals names. So we call this individual Alvin, Betty, and Mr. Pickles. Okay? So snow globe world is just an imaginary world. And what snow globe world represents is a domain of discourse. That is, it's the world that we're talking about in a particular conversation. Now, of course, in the actual world, there are, 7 billion people, tables, chairs, airplanes. But in a particular conversation, we may only be talking about 2 people, 3 individuals, as the case may be. So what we do, imagine that the entire rest of the world doesn't exist, except for the individuals we happen to be talking about in a particular conversation. And that is our domain of discourse, right? So we have a conversation about 3 individuals, Alvin, Betty, and Mr. Pickles, and they constitute our domain of discourse. The 3 individuals in our domain of discourse. Now, we're going to say some other things about our domain of discourse. Let's imagine that everything on this side, on the left-hand side, is good, and everything on the right-hand side of our domain of discourse is evil, right? So Alvin and Betty are good, and Mr. Pickles is evil. Okay, this is not logical truth. This is completely arbitrary. Logicians tend to be whimsical, so that's part of that. Now, Alvin, Betty, and Mr. Pickles are the English names for these individuals. Okay? But these individuals also have an FOL name. And an FOL name is basically a lowercase letter from the upper end of the alphabet. So we start with A. So Alvin's name would be lowercase a. That's his FOL name. Betty's FOL name would be lowercase b. And Mr. Pickles' lowercase name would be c. Right? Now, these lowercase FOL names are what are referred to as constants. And the reason they're called constants is because once we assign FOL name to an individual in our domain of discourse, that name always refers to that individual and no one else. So once we assign lowercase a to Alvin, lowercase a never refers to Betty or Mr. Pickles, always to Alvin. Okay? And hence constant. A next key term is a predicate. And a predicate allows us to make claims about individuals in a domain of discourse. So, for example, and whereas constants are represented by lowercase letters from the first half of the alphabet, predicates are represented by uppercase letters from anywhere in the alphabet. You can have uppercase G, uppercase L, uppercase B, and so on. And predicates ascribe certain properties or relations to individuals in a domain of discourse. So, for example, we can have the predicate G mean dash is good. Alright. And if we wanted to say something like Alvin is good, then this will be represented by saying GA, constant A. Now notice that the G comes before the constant A, right? Now in English, normally if we say something, we put the individual who's the subject first, so we say Alvin is good. But in FOL, we put the predicate is good first, and then the individual that constitutes the subject. And this is what we call prefix notation. Right? It's called prefix because the predicate comes first. And so we say good is Alvin, or Alvin is good. And what this does, it attributes a certain property to Alvin, right? So it says Alvin has the property of goodness, okay? However, oftentimes, we don't only want to attribute properties to individuals in a domain of discourse. Sometimes we want to describe relationships between two or more individuals in a domain of discourse. So let's create some relationships. So let's imagine that Alvin loves Betty, and Betty loves Mr. Pickles, right? Because that's what good people do. And we can imagine that Mr. Pickles loves himself, because that's what cats do. So we have some relationships now. And if I wanted to say something like, Alvin loves Betty, I have, which involves two objects, or two individuals, then I have what is called a two-place predicate. So we use L to stand for dash, loves, dash, right? So it has two places. And we write that using our prefix notation, L, and the name for Alvin, A, comma, the name for Betty, lowercase b. And then we have Alvin loves Betty, right? We can also have a three-place predicate. So, for example, if I want to say Betty is between Alvin and Mr. Pickles, right? So let's say we have B, and we said B is between dash and dash, right? So this is our predicate. And then if you want to write it in the prefix notation, again we have B bracket and the name for Betty, the name for Alvin, and the name for Mr. Pickles. So Betty is between Alvin and Mr. Pickles. Right? And this is what we call a three-place predicate, because he has three individuals in the predicate. Now, all of these claims are attributed either one property to one individual or describing one relation between two or more individuals. And when you have one predicate here, is what we refer to as an atomic sentence, right? So atomic sentence is one where it involves one predicate. It may have more than one individual. We're saying one thing about those individuals. Right? However, we may want to have compound sentences. And this brings us to the last bit of terminology, which is a Boolean connective. And Boolean connectives is named after the logician George Boole. And there are 5 Boolean connectives. We'll go over one of these connectives for time. And this connected is called a conjunction. And the conjunction corresponds with to the English word and. Right? And it's called connected because it allows us to connect these smaller sentences to create larger compound sentences. Okay? So, for example, if I wanted to say Alvin is good and Alvin loves Betty, then alright, Alvin is good and Alvin loves Betty. So, and now I have this compound sentence which is made up of two simple atomic sentences. Okay. Now, to assess a sentence relative to a domain of interpretation, we simply have to check to see if our domain of interpretation makes a sentence true. Now, in the case if I had something like this, Betty's evil, then I simply have to go to the domain of interpretation and see, well, is she in the good half of the universe or domain of discourse or the evil half? And she's not, and so this gets false. Right? In the case of a conjunction is true just in case both conjuncts are true. So these are the conjuncts. The conjuncts are just either end of a conjunction. Right? And as I said before, the conjunction corresponds to the English and. So if you think, for example, if I said it is November 30th and it is rain outside, then that statement is true just in case both of those claims are true. Right? If it's not rain outside, even though it's November 30th, the statement is not true. Or examples from many parents, if I say I brushed my teeth and went to bed, but I just went to bed but I didn't brush my teeth, then that statement, I brushed my teeth and went to bed, is false, even though I did go to bed, but I didn't brush my teeth. So both conjuncts have to be true in order, both of these have to be true in order for the entire conjunction to be true. Okay, so now that we've covered our theory, you should be able to tell me what these mean and whether they're true or false relative to that domain of interpretation over there. So, anyone who's volunteer, what does this say?
True.
Okay, tell me what it means first. Laska.
Mr. Pickles loves Mr. Pickles.
Right, exactly. And
It's true.
okay, excellent. Alright. Someone else? Yes.
Alvin loves Betty, and Alvin is good.
Good.
It's true.
Great. So this is true as well. This example. Yes, go ahead. Yes, this is a tricky one. Yeah.
Betty loves Mr. Pickles.
Yes.
And Mr. Pickles is evil.
Yeah.
And Mr. Pickles is between Alvin and Betty.
Right.
So it's false.
Right, exactly. Exactly. So it's false. These two are true, but this one isn't. And the conjunction requires that all of the conjuncts be true. Right? So this one's going to be tricky because it has three conjuncts, but you get the principle. Yes?
But if he loves her and she loves Mr. Pickles, isn't Mr. Pickles in some way between them? Is it allowed for that kind of thinking or not?
No. Unfortunately. So yeah, it depends on what we mean by between. So yeah. So in this case, between is a spatial description rather than an emotional love relationship between. Yeah. But yeah. So congratulations, you learned a piece of FOL.